All right, let's see if I can get this right. Good evening.
Good evening.
How many of you have ever heard of Kinbridge, Virginia? Raise your hand. How do you know Kinbridge? You've been to Kinbridge. And you've been to Kinbridge too?
No, but I deal with the company Kinbridge Construction.
Yes. That's our Fortune 500 company. So I was born and raised in Kinbridge by my grandparents. It's a town of about 1,200, 1,300 when tourists are there. It's a small rural town in Virginia, and we farm tobacco, pigs, corn. I tell everybody, if you want to inspire a child to go to college, take them to the tobacco fields. Well, my grandfather, my relationship with my grandfather is probably the most influential relationship that I have had with any human being. He died 5 years ago this year. He was a remarkable man. Born in 1914, went to school for 6 years in a barn, and then because of the way society was then as an African-American male, was not able to go any further than that, and went out and worked, as he would call it, in the woods, cutting trees, hauling trees. And he did that, and he was so good at it, he eventually got to the place where he was able to build his own sawmill. And so for a living, we had a sawmill, and we had the farm, and I went to school and all that good stuff. I can remember my grandfather valued a lot of things, but one thing that he was uncompromising about was working hard. That's one of the things I thank him for, is attempting to pass on that value to me. He used to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning with no alarm clock. I don't know about you, but it takes me an alarm clock to get up at 11 a.m. And he was uncompromising about hard work. And I remember one day, I'm in the tobacco field. And I don't know how many of you have ever farmed tobacco. Nobody. That's why you all look so good. It's hard work. When I was growing up, the plant is about that high, and there are 20 or so leaves on it. And the way you cultivate it is you start from the bottom. You reach down and you pull it, as they call it. You pull 4 or 5 leaves off at a time. You pull about 4 times a season. Pull 4 or 5 leaves off, you stick them under your arm, and you go to the next plant, you pull 4 or 5 leaves off, you stick it under your arm, and there's a tractor in the field. And when your arm gets full, you put those leaves in, and then you go back. And I remember looking at the end of the row, and I saw my grandfather, and one thing I was never unsure about, or one thing that was never ambiguous when I was growing up, was whether my grandfather loved me. My grandfather would have died for me, and I knew it. He always showed that to me. But I'm out there in that tobacco field, and it's August, and it's about 100 degrees. And the sun is there, and tobacco has wax on it, and the wax gets all, look, I had an afro back then. Wax gets in your hair, and there's snakes in the tobacco. It's terrible. It's good. Like I said, it inspires you to go to college. But I'm scheming. My grandfather's at the end of the row, and I'm thinking, I gotta get out of here. That's all I'm thinking. I gotta get out of here. So I pull down to the end of the row, and my grandfather's at the end, and I look up at him, trying to put on the most pathetic looking face that I can put on. And I said, Grandpa, my back is killing me. I gotta get out of here. He looks at me with the broadest smile, and he never paused. And he said, boy, when I was your age, I didn't have a back. And he stumped me. I did not, I wasn't prepared for that response. So I went on in the tobacco field. It's a hard work, one of the last. lessons. The other lesson I want to tell you about is tenacity. He was a tenacious guy, and that's how he was able to, with 6 years of education in a barn, do all the things that he did. I remember when he was 85 years old, and I was a little older then, he was rushed to the hospital, to the emergency room at the Medical College of Virginia, which was the nearest big city to us, an hour and a half away. And when he got there, the doctors determined that he had what's called bacterial meningitis. I don't know if there are any doctors in the room tonight, but he was 85 when he contracted bacterial meningitis. Bacteria entered his eye, traveled down his optic nerve, and got into his meninges. And I rushed to the hospital, and the doctor came out, and he said, "Let's talk." And he said to me, he said, "You know, if your grandfather were 45, I would tell you that he's probably not going to make it." He said, "But he's 85. He said, there's no way he's going to make it." He said, "So what code would you like tonight?" And I said, "What do you mean, well, what code?" He says, "Well, how much do you want us to do if we have to resuscitate your grandfather?" He said, I need to prepare you. Your grandfather's going to die." And I looked at him, and my grandfather was in intensive care. He was in a semi-comatose state at that point. They had devices monitoring his vital signs, but he couldn't speak, and he was, as I say, in a semi-comatose state. But I knew my grandfather. I knew that he was tough, and I knew he was a man of faith. And I looked at the doctor, and I just said, you do your thing, and he'll do his." And I said, "Well, how do you treat this?" He said, we give him something to try to fight off the bacteria, but that's all we can do." And I said, "Well, can I stay with him tonight?" He said, "Yes, you can stay with him." So he gave me a mask, and I sat in the room with him, and he comes in at one point. He says, "Look, the bacteria is living in your grandfather's eye. I'm not sure that this will help, but would you allow us to remove his eye from the socket? Because that's the best chance we have of trying to get this bacteria out of his body." And you know, I'm thinking if there's a small chance that my grandfather could live, yes, do it. So he removed that eye. I didn't think another thought about it except that this could be a chance. Next morning, I sleep in there. The next morning, the nurse is in there. My grandfather seems to still be in a semi-comatose state. The nurse is looking at the vital signs. And I don't know what moved me, but something moved me to call his name. And I said, "Grandpa." And he answered. He said, "Huh?" And the nurse looked at me. She said, "Did you say something?" I said, No, I didn't say anything. You better go get that doctor." She went and got the doctor. And he came in, and sure enough, my grandfather was coming out of this semi-comatose state. The doctor looked at me and he said, "I can't explain it medically." He said, "I cannot explain it medically." So at that point, he says, "Your grandfather, he's going to make it. He has beat this thing." Well, at that point, I'm thinking, oh no. What do I do about the eye? And the doctor looks at me and he goes, that's your category. I've done my job. And so I'm like, okay, I got this. And so my grandfather comes out of his semi-comatose state. And I decided, well, I just need to tell him. And so I go to him and I said, "Grandpa, there's something I have to tell you." I said, "Thank God." I said, we thought you were gone, but I said, "I knew you were tough." And he said, "Yeah, I'm a tough country boy." I said, "Yeah, well, I had to let them remove your eye, that right eye, because it was the only chance that we had for you to live." He looked right up at me and he said, "That's all right, boy." He said, "I couldn't see out of that eye anyway." He lived for 10 more years. We never talked about that eye. He was was tenacious, he was a hard worker, he was my heart. Thank you.